The sleek, obsidian-colored SUV cut through the morning traffic like a predator through a flock of pigeons. Karen Sterling, her designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose, drummed manicured fingers on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. She was already 5 minutes behind schedule for her spin class, a cardinal sin in her meticulously ordered life. The light ahead was stubbornly amber, then red. Karen scoffed, muttering, "Seriously? This is ridiculous." Her phone, nestled in its dashboard cradle, buzzed with an incoming text from her spin instructor. "Don't be late, Karen. We're hitting a new PR today." Karen rolled her eyes, as if she needed a PR. Her body was a temple, sculpted through relentless discipline and the finest trainers money could buy. This traffic, however, was testing her zen. When the light finally turned green, Karen didn't just accelerate, she launched. The powerful engine roared, pushing the SUV forward with an eager surge. She swerved around a slow-moving sedan, narrowly missing a curb. Her focus was solely on the clock, ticking away precious seconds. Then, it happened. A flash of pale yellow, a sudden, sickening thud that vibrated through the chassis and up her arms. It wasn't a gentle bump. It was the distinct, horrifying sound of something soft, yet solid, yielding under the weight of 2 tons of steel. Karen's breath hitched. Her foot hovered over the brake for a fraction of a second, an instinct quickly overridden by a surge of adrenaline and a cold, calculating fear. She glanced in the rearview mirror. A crumpled figure lay in the street, an arm twisted at an unnatural angle, a splash of red blooming on the asphalt. A bicycle lay nearby, its front wheel spinning uselessly. No, no, no. This wasn't happening. Not to her. Her mind raced, a frantic kaleidoscope of consequences. Police reports, insurance hikes, the media, the scandal. Her carefully curated image, her charity board positions, her husband's lucrative political ambitions. All of it could unravel. And for what? Some idiot who wasn't looking where they were going. "Stupid," she whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound, barely audible above the thumping of her own heart. Absolutely idiotic. She didn't stop. The SUV surged forward, gaining speed. One more glance in the mirror, and the figure was receding, shrinking, becoming less and less real. It was just a bump. A minor inconvenience. A mistake. Nobody important. By the time she reached the spin studio, her hands were still trembling, but her face was a mask of practiced calm. "Traffic was a nightmare," she announced to the instructor, forcing a bright smile. "But I'm here. Let's do this." Across town, in the gleaming penthouse office of Chen Industries, David Chen surveyed the city's sprawl with an almost detached air. He was a man carved from granite, with eyes that saw market trends and projected profits, a mind that never stopped calculating. At 38, he was a titan, a self-made billionaire, but beneath the impeccable suit and the ruthless efficiency, there was an emptiness that even his empire couldn't fill. His phone vibrated, a discreet, custom tone reserved for his executive assistant, Lisa. He picked it up. "Yes, Lisa?" "Mr. Chen," Lisa's voice was unusually strained. "I apologize for interrupting, but you have an urgent call. From St. Jude's Hospital." David felt a cold prickle of unease. St. Jude's. His family rarely used it. He had no ailing relatives. "Transfer it," he commanded, his voice betraying a hint of his growing apprehension. A moment later, a clipped, professional voice filled his ear. "Mr. Chen? This is Dr. Evans, head of emergency services at St. Jude's. Are you by any chance acquainted with a Miss Clara Hayes?" The name hit David like a physical blow. Clara. He hadn't heard it, hadn't thought it with such immediacy in years. It was a name etched into the deepest, most guarded chambers of his heart. "Clara?" he repeated, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Yes, I know her. What's happened?" "Ms. Hayes was brought in approximately 30 minutes ago. She was involved in a serious hit-and-run accident. Extensive trauma. Multiple fractures, severe head injury. She's in critical condition, Mr. Chen." We've stabilized her for now, but it's grave. We need you here immediately. The city outside his window, usually a symphony of ambition and progress, suddenly fell silent. David felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him cold. Clara, his Clara, the woman who had taught him how to laugh, how to love, before life, cruel and unyielding, had ripped them apart. Now this. I'm on my way, he managed, the words catching in his throat. He hung up, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. He barked at Lisa through the intercom, "Clear my schedule. All of it. Get the car ready. St. Jude's. Now." At St. Jude's, the fluorescent lights of the emergency waiting room seemed to mock the swirling darkness in David's mind. He paced, a wrestle. Karen's breath hitched in her throat, the half-empty wine glass slipping from her numb fingers. It hit the polished marble floor with a soft thud, a stark contrast to the earthquake rattling her inside. David Chen. The name, whispered by the news anchor, resonated like a death knell in the silent living room. Not just a close acquaintance, but his close acquaintance. The weight of that implication crushed her, stealing the air from her lungs. She stumbled backward, her gaze fixed on the flickering screen where David Chen's stern, unyielding face now appeared in a file photo. The man was a titan, a force of nature, known for his ruthless precision in business and his impenetrable private life. To be connected to him, even tangentially, meant that the nobody she had dismissed was, in fact, somebody of immense consequence. A wave of ice-cold terror washed over her, followed by a sickening wave of self-loathing. How could she have been so unbelievably, utterly blind? Robert, engrossed in his phone, barely registered her distress. "What was that?" he mumbled, still scrolling. Karen couldn't speak. Her tongue felt thick, her mouth suddenly dry. She watched, horrified, as the news report cut to footage of a mangled bicycle, then a blurry shot of paramedics attending to a figure on the ground. A flash of pale yellow fabric, the same color as the cyclist she'd hit. "Nothing," she managed, her voice a strained whisper, as she quickly pressed the remote, turning off the television. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying the frantic thumping of her heart. She knelt, fumbling to pick up the wine glass, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped it again. "Just spilled some wine." Robert glanced up, a fleeting frown on his face. "You all right, babe? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Fine," Karen snapped a little too sharply. "Just tired. Long day." She forced a weak smile, hoping it masked the sheer panic bubbling beneath her composure. She couldn't tell him. Robert, with his carefully constructed image, his political aspirations, would never understand. He'd be furious, devastated, and worst of all, he'd see her as a liability. She retreated to the kitchen, the phantom image of Clara's crumpled form haunting her every step. Her mind raced, desperate for an escape, a way to make this disappear. No one saw her. No one knew. A black SUV speeding. That was all the witness said. It wasn't enough. Was it? At St. Jude's, David Chen stood by Clara's bedside, the sterile beeping of machines the only sound in the hushed intensive care unit. Clara lay motionless, a labyrinth of tubes and wires connecting her fragile body to life-sustaining machines. Her face, usually so animated, so full of life, was pale and still, a stark bandage wrapped around her head. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, unwilling to touch, afraid he might somehow shatter the last remnants of her existence. He had held her hand countless times, traced the lines of her palm, felt the warmth of her fingers intertwine with his. Now she was cold, distant, a ghost of the woman he once knew, the woman he still, secretly, loved. Detective Miller, a seasoned veteran with weary eyes, approached him. "Mr. Chen, I'm Detective Miller. I understand Ms. Hayes is a significant person in your life." David turned, his eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burning with a quiet intensity. "She is everything to me, Detective. Or she was. What have you found?" Miller sighed. "Not much, I'm afraid. Witness saw a dark-colored SUV, possibly black, speeding away from the scene. It was a chaotic intersection. No plates, no clear description of the driver. We've put out an APB, checked traffic cameras, but so far nothing definitive. It's like the vehicle vanished into thin air. Vanish into thin air. David's voice was low, dangerous. Someone hit her, detective, and they left her to die in the street. You're telling me there's no way to find them? We're doing everything we can, Mr. Chen. We'll find them. We always do. Miller paused, observing the raw pain in David's eyes. We understand this is difficult. We'll keep you updated. But David wasn't listening. His gaze was fixed on Clara's still form. He felt a cold, hard resolve settle deep within him. The police might be doing everything they can, but it wasn't enough. Not for Clara. He would use every resource at his disposal, every connection, every penny of his fortune, to find the person who had done this. And when he did, he would make them pay. He would ensure they experienced a fraction of the pain they had inflicted. He turned back to Miller, his voice regaining its usual steel. Detective, I want a full, round-the-clock investigation. Assign your best. If you need more resources, I will provide them. Private investigators, forensic experts, whatever it takes. Do you understand? Miller, taken aback by the sudden shift in tone, nodded. Yes, Mr. Chen. We understand. The echo of the police officer's footsteps faded, but Karen Sterling remained frozen in her doorway, the cold seeping into her bones. The polite inquiry had felt like an interrogation, every casual question a laser beam aimed directly at her secret. Black SUV. The officer's words, calm and professional, now replayed in her mind, sounding like a direct accusation. They were closing in. The suffocating certainty of it made her head spin. She slammed the door shut, the sound rattling through the silent house. Her legs felt weak, threatening to give out. She stumbled to the nearest armchair, collapsing onto it, her face buried in her hands. This wasn't just a bad dream she could wake from. This was a nightmare unfolding in terrifying slow motion, and she was trapped inside it. How much did they know? Had a traffic camera caught her license plate? Was there another witness, someone who hadn't been so vague? The carefully constructed fortress of her denial was crumbling, brick by agonizing brick. Panic, raw and unadulterated, began to claw at her throat. She needed to think, to plan. But her mind was a whirlwind of disjointed images. Clara's pale yellow jacket, David Chen's steely gaze on the news, the officer's sharp, observant eyes. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Her phone vibrated, startling her. It was Robert. She stared at the screen, a fresh wave of dread washing over her. She couldn't face him, not now. Not with this raw, exposed fear. She let it ring, then send to voicemail. She needed to compose herself, to build back the facade before he came home. But the cracks were too deep now. In his fortified office, David Chen watched Marcus Thorne's presentation with an almost predatory focus. The private investigator had a grid of satellite images projected onto the massive screen, red lines tracing potential routes, green dots marking known traffic cameras. It looked like a military operation, a manhunt executed with corporate efficiency. We've identified 6 black SUVs that match the witness's general description, Mr. Chen, Thorne reported, his voice crisp. All registered within a 10-mile radius of the accident. We've also cross-referenced with local car washes and service stations for any recent damage reports that align with a vehicle impacting a bicycle or person. David leaned forward, his elbows on his desk, his gaze unwavering. And our list of potential suspects? We've narrowed it down to 4 individuals who were in the vicinity at the time of the accident and own one of those 6 vehicles, Thorne continued, clicking to reveal 4 mugshots, each accompanied by a brief profile. One is a businessman, clean record. Another is a known thrill-seeker, several speeding tickets. The third is a homemaker, no priors. And the fourth. Thorne paused, clicking to bring up a new profile. Karen Sterling, wife of State Senator Robert Sterling, early 40s, owns a black Mercedes-Benz GLE 450. No criminal record, but several traffic violations in the past for minor infractions. David's eyes narrowed as he studied Karen's photo, perfectly styled blonde hair, an expensive, confident smile. A woman who exuded privilege and entitlement. He felt a cold flicker of recognition. He'd seen her at charity galas, her husband always by her side, a plastic smile plastered on his face. The Sterlings, a power couple, admired and envied in their social circles. Robert Sterling, David mused, the name tasting like ash on his tongue. He's making a play for the governor's office, isn't he? That's correct, Mr. Chin. A rising star. Very image-conscious. Image-conscious, David repeated, a chilling smile forming on his lips. That could be useful. What do we have on her movements that morning? Thorne clicked again, displaying a timeline. Her car, registered to her, was detected by a license plate reader exactly 3 minutes before the accident, about a mile away from the intersection. It was then detected again, 10 minutes after the accident, heading in the opposite direction on a different arterial road, roughly 5 miles away. Her usual route to her spin class. So she was there, David stated, not a question, but a grim affirmation. And she sped away. The rage that had been simmering within him since Clara's accident began to boil over. This woman, this Karen Sterling, had hit Clara and fled. And now she was living her privileged life, while Clara fought for hers in a hospital bed. The sheer injustice of it made his fists clench. We don't have definitive proof it was her behind the wheel, or even her specific vehicle that hit Ms. Hayes, Thorne cautioned. But the proximity and timing are highly suspicious. The police are also looking into it, based on the witness description of a black SUV. Let them look, David said, his voice dangerously quiet. But I want more. I want concrete evidence. I want video. I want anything that ties her directly to Clara. He looked at Thorne, The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusations, cutting through the comfortable veneer of their marriage like a shard of ice. Robert's eyes, usually warm and reassuring, were now cold and probing, stripping away Karen's carefully constructed composure. "What aren't you telling me?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet, the low hum of it more menacing than a shout. Karen felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her with a dizzying emptiness. The kitchen, once a symbol of her domestic bliss, now felt like an interrogation room, the stark overhead lights suddenly too bright, too revealing. Her mind raced, scrambling for an excuse, a plausible lie, but her tongue felt like sandpaper, incapable of forming a coherent response. It's nothing," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a pathetic attempt at denial. "I'm just stressed, Robert. This campaign, all the pressure." He took a step closer, his gaze unblinking. "Don't insult my intelligence, Karen. You shrieked at me. You look like you're about to run a marathon and throw up at the same time. This isn't about campaign stress. This is about that hit and run, isn't it? The reckless cyclist you almost hit." His eyes narrowed, suspicion hardening into certainty. It wasn't a near miss, was it? The raw terror on Karen's face was all the answer he needed. His jaw tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening. "My God, Karen! What did you do?" Tears welled in Karen's eyes, hot and stinging, blurring the edges of the room. The dam had burst. The carefully guarded secret, the burden she had carried alone, was now exposed. I didn't mean to," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of desperate confession. She came out of nowhere. It was so fast, Robert. I panicked. I couldn't stop. I couldn't." Robert recoiled as if struck, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The beer bottle slipped from his fingers, crashing to the floor, the sound echoing the shattering of their life together. "You left her?" he asked, his voice barely audible, laced with a disgust that pierced Karen deeper than any anger. "You hit someone and you just left them there?" "I was scared," Karen cried, pleading with him, desperate for understanding, for absolution. I thought she was just a nobody. I didn't know it was David Chen's. I didn't know." The mention of David Chen's name ignited a fresh fury in Robert. His political career, built on a foundation of integrity and public trust, flashed before his eyes, collapsing in a catastrophic domino effect. "David Chen?" he snarled, his voice rising raw with betrayal. "You hit David Chen's Clara Hayes? Do you have any idea what this means? Do you have any idea what you've done, Karen?" He started pacing, a frenzied energy radiating from him, his hands raking through his hair. "My campaign. Everything. It's over. This will destroy me. Destroy us." His gaze fell on her again, no longer just suspicion, but bitter resentment. "How could you be so incredibly selfish? So reckless?" "I'm sorry," Karen whispered, shrinking back, her sobs turning into gasps. "I'm so sorry, Robert." But the words felt hollow, inadequate, powerless against the magnitude of her transgression. "Sorry won't cut it, Karen," he roared, his voice bouncing off the kitchen walls. "Sorry won't put a woman out of a coma. Sorry won't save my career. Or yours. Did you really think you could just get away with it? That there would be no consequences?" He ran a hand over his face, his expression grim. "We need to figure this out. Now. Before Chen's people or the police find something definitive." While Karen and Robert's domestic world crumbled, David Chen's meticulously organized search for justice intensified. Marcus Thorne presented his findings with cold, hard precision. "Mr. Chen, we've secured additional CCTV footage. It's grainy, but at 7:59 a.m. on the day of the accident, a black Mercedes GLE 450, matching Mrs. Sterling's vehicle, is seen speeding through the intersection just moments after the impact. No plate is perfectly clear, but the make and model are unmistakable." He clicked, and a short, blurred video clip played on the large screen. David stared at the footage, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a chilling vindication. It wasn't definitive proof, not yet, but it was enough to solidify his suspicions. "Unmistakable," he echoed, the word a pronouncement of judgment. "And the damage reports?" "Still nothing concrete from car washes or body shops directly in her neighborhood," Thorne reported. "She's smart enough not to take it there. But we're expanding the search. We're also looking into any personal connections she might have, any favors she could call in to get a repair done discreetly." David leaned back in his chair, a grim smile touching his lips. "She's not that smart, Marcus. No one who commits an act like this truly is. Everyone leaves a trail. And Karen Sterling's trail." The chilling proposition hung heavy in the air, a silent ultimatum delivered with the cold precision of a death sentence. Dispose of the car. Lie. Double down on her deception. Karen stared at Robert, the man who was supposed to be her sanctuary, now her reluctant accomplice, or perhaps her executioner. The last vestiges of her carefully constructed world shattered, leaving her exposed to the brutal reality of her predicament. "Get rid of the car," Karen finally whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible. The idea was monstrous, a tangible symbol of her crime, a physical representation of her guilt. Robert's eyes, devoid of their usual warmth, were fixed on hers. "Yes, Karen. As soon as possible. And any evidence, anything that ties us to that accident." He slammed his empty glass onto the coffee table with a thud that echoed the finality of his decision. "This isn't about right or wrong anymore. This is about survival. My career, our reputation, our entire life. It all hangs on this." His words, though harsh, contained a desperate logic that Karen, in her panicked state, couldn't entirely dismiss. The image of a jail cell, stark and unforgiving, flashed before her eyes, eclipsing even the guilt she felt for Clara. "How?" she asked, the single word escaping her lips like a plea. Robert began to pace again, his mind already spinning with the mechanics of damage control. I have contacts, people who can make things disappear. But it has to be discreet. Absolutely no paper trail. No questions asked. He stopped, turning to face her, his expression grim. And from now on, Karen, you listen to me. No more outbursts. No more hysterics. You need to be strong. For us. The following days were a blur of hushed phone calls and clandestine arrangements. Karen watched, detached, as Robert became a stranger, a ruthless strategist driven by an instinct for self-preservation. He arranged for the Mercedes to be picked up late at night, under the cover of darkness. She stood at the window, a knot of dread in her stomach, as the sleek black vehicle, her pride and joy, was driven away, disappearing into the night like a phantom. It was gone, and with it, she hoped, a piece of her unbearable burden, but the silence that followed was not relief. It was merely a heavier weight. The car was gone, but the accident, Clara, and David Chen were not. At St. Jude's, Clara Hayes remained in a medically induced coma. David Chen was a constant, almost ghostly, presence in the ICU, his grim vigilance a silent testament to his unwavering hope and simmering rage. Dr. Evans, growing accustomed to his intense gaze, delivered updates with a cautious professionalism. No significant change, Mr. Chen, Dr. Evans reported one afternoon, her voice soft. Her vital signs are stable, but the brain swelling, it's still a major concern. We're doing everything we can to reduce it, but we won't know the extent of the damage until she wakes up, if she wakes up. If she wakes up, David repeated, the words a bitter echo. He looked at Clara, her chest rising and falling with the aid of a ventilator, a fragile rhythm in the silence. He had to believe. He refused to consider any other outcome. Marcus Thorne, his own investigations relentless, found David in the waiting room later that day. Mr. Chen, we have a lead on the Mercedes GLE 450. It was spotted being loaded onto a flatbed truck late last night, heading out of state. Cash payment off the books. Our sources indicate it's on its way to a chop shop. David's eyes, tired from lack of sleep, suddenly sharpened. A chop shop? Who arranged it? We're tracing the contact. It's connected to a known fixer, someone with ties to various unsavory individuals. But here's the kicker. The flatbed was registered to a company that occasionally does work for State Senator Robert Sterling's campaign. Hauling equipment, that sort of thing. David leaned back, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. Robert Sterling. So, the husband is now involved in obstruction of justice. Interesting. The pieces were fitting together with a terrifying precision. Karen Sterling, the entitled socialite, running down Clara. Robert Sterling, the ambitious politician, orchestrating the cover-up. The sheer audacity of it infuriated him, but also fueled his resolve. And the car, Mr. Chen? Thorne asked. It'll be gone soon. Parts scattered across state lines. Let it go, David said, his voice cold. The car was just a tool. The real evidence is in their actions. Robert Sterling, helping his wife destroy evidence. That tells me everything I need to know about their guilt. He paused, his gaze hardening. It's time to move beyond discreet inquiries, Marcus. It's time to send a very clear message. Karen, trapped in the gilded cage of her home, felt the walls closing in with suffocating intensity. Her social life had vanished, replaced by a chilling silence. Even her housekeeper, Martha, usually a fount of loca.